y te escuchamos. Les recordamos rapidito que hay una posibilidad de interpretación al inglés
There is, of
y
course, a possibility of interpretation to English and to Spanish. So, in case anyone wants to hear and participate, of course, you can click on the button below and select the language that you would like to hear it in.
Perfecto. ¿Debo yo iniciar el video,
Hello,
Liliana?
should I initiate the video, Diana?
Ya, perfecto.
Yes, you can
Buenas
begin with it.
noches con todos. Es
Okay,
fantástico poder estar
good night to all
esta
of you.
noche aquí.
It's fantastic to be here.
Nuevamente muy contenta porque
I'm really happy to be here because
este encuentro se da en el
this
contexto de
encounter
una jornada muy bella
is in
que
the
tuvo lugar
context
este
of
fin de
a
semana,
very
del que
nice
hablará ahora, y que
journey.
creo que
One of them is
nos
Andres, is
demuestra
going to speak now.
de
And
este ímpetu que tiene la
I
reflexión
think
sobre el proceso del Yasuní en el contexto de las transiciones, sino
this
las
context
oportunidades
in
que
the
se
context
crean
of
a lo largo de
transitions
los distintos
is
países.
super important. And it's not something that should
Estos
stay
para poder
in
profundizar este
just one
interés.
country. These
Y comienzo
efforts to
primero una introducción
make
cortita,
this
porque fue la
profound
primera,
impact
y porque
is
para
important.
ponernos, sobre todo a las
I'm going to
primeras
make a
palabras, que
short
son
introduction because I am the
propias
first
del
one.
antecedente
So I'd like
de este
to
proceso. Quería
tell you
empezar
all the
señalando que en la geopolítica
archives.
occidental, sobre todo en
And I
la
would like
agenda
to start by
del
beginning that in
liderazgo, cada
geopolitical
año es que
politics,
ha sido el año más
every
caliente del
single
mundo, ¿no?
year
Pero de alguna manera
there
este
is
año
some
tuvo
sort
una
of
cosa muy especial.
answer,
Los
right?
sentimientos
But
no han estado
to
muy lejos en el
this
mundo
year
entero
has
con
been
América
the
Latina
most hot, the
particularmente,
hottest one.
desastres,
And
olas de refugiados, guerras,
this has been
conflictos,
really difficult because we
y
have been
esto
living through
resulta de que
many
muchos de
global
nosotros la vivimos
events in
como
Latin
una
America, of
suerte de
course.
dignidad y
And
ética de
we
la
also live
esperanza,
this
un
in an
poco
ethic
como dice
and
Fito Páez,
hopeful way,
una
as
señal de que
Fito
no
Páez
todo
says.
está perdido.
This is a sign that not everything is
No todo
lost.
está perdido porque la
And
mayoría
not
del
everything is
Ecuador
lost because
decidió
the
hace
majority of
algunos
Ecuador
años
decided to vote
parar una operación petrolera
against
en
the
una zona que es como muy importante en el Ecuador.
an operation in Ecuador.
El Yasuní es un
What is
parque
Yasuni?
nacional, es el
So
parque
Yasuni is a
nacional
national park.
más importante del Ecuador
It's the most
continental.
important park in
Es además
continental
reserva de la
Ecuador,
biosfera,
and it's
es
also
territorio indígena y también
has a large
territorio de pueblos en aislamiento
biosphere.
voluntario. Ha sido
And there's
reconocido
also
por distintos grupos de científicos como la zona más biodiversa a nivel mundial por los
has been
habitantes que la
recognized
habitan.
as the most
Y
biodiverse region in the
evidentemente es
world.
una parte un
And
poco
it's
más alta
also
de la Amazonía, en donde
home
durante el
to
Pleistoceno se formaron refugios de
many
biodiversidad,
peoples.
¿no es cierto? Ahora, en esta zona hay bloques
Now,
petroleros.
in this
Y este
zone, there
bloque
are
contiene las más
petrolef
importantes
petrol
reservas del Ecuador.
blocks, and
Este
one of them
bloque,
has the most
que le llama
important
Bloque 43 o ITT,
reserves of oil.
de los campos petroleros,
This
que es
block is
aquí
called
Tambococha,
for
Tibutini,
ITT
es un bloque sobre el que llevamos muchos
in
años
the
intentando pararlo y
Tambococha Tiputini oil
impulsamos
field.
muchos
And we
procesos
have been
de
implementing a lot of
emergencia para
processes
que no se
to
inicie la
stop,
operación.
so as
Y
not to initiate any kind of
un
operations to
proceso de
extract the
recolección
oil.
de firmas
And
que
we
fue
have done a
finalmente
process of
derrotado y
recollection
cancelado.
of signs that
Después de
was
10
cancelled.
años de haber peleado
10
ya
years
tribunales y en procesos
fighting
legales,
in
se
tribunals
logró
and
que
legal
efectivamente se
events,
compruebe que hubo un fraude
and
y se
it
logró
was a fraud.
convocar
We
la consulta
uh,
popular. Ahora, hay cuatro
could prove this
elementos
that it was a
como para
fraud, it was
saber qué es
frauded.
esa consulta popular.
There are a
Primero,
few elements that we have to
en
know
esta
about
parte
this.
de este proceso de recolección de firmas,
First of all,
ya hace
this
10
is part of
años
the
se
recollection of
publicó una
signs.
pregunta que decía, ¿está usted de acuerdo con que el gobierno
And a
ecuatoriano
few years ago, a
implemente
question was held,
conocido
are
como
you,
Bloque
do
43
you agree
indefinidamente
that the
extendido?
government uses the
Esto hace 10 años.
43 block?
Como les decía, 10 años ha tardado la
This has
justicia
been
en
10 years.
lograr esta
We've
obstrucción
been
por
working for
parte del
10 years.
Estado en
The
este
justice has been
proceso
working
de participación y
without
se convocó
having
a esta
rest.
consulta popular en medio de una crisis política del país muy
And there
grande,
was a
donde se
political
daban unas
crisis
elecciones que
in
se realizan
Ecuador.
simultáneamente
It
con
was
unas elecciones anticipadas. Aquí en el Ecuador hay un procedimiento que se llama la muerte cruzada,
there's,
es
there's
decir,
a process here that is called
para
la muerte
realizarse
cruzada, the
se
crossed
cancelan
death.
tanto la Asamblea Nacional como el presidente
The
y se realizan
National
nuevas elecciones.
Assembly and the
Y
president
este
are
proceso
cancelled
fue
and new
realizado en
elections are
paralelo con otra consulta de
provoked.
carácter ambiental en el Chocó andino por una zona muy biodiversa también, para evitar que la provincia es regional ¿no? Para evitar que Quito, el cantón metropolitano de Quito, sea declarado libre de minería. Las elecciones se hicieron el 20 de
Elections began in the 20th of August of last year. 5 million of Ecuadorians said that it was correct to leave the crude oil underground. And this was a campaign that has never been seen in the country to stop oil companies to extract oil from the ground. Because if they kept doing this, it was going to impact negatively in the health and the environment. However, we won. Practically 60% of the votes gave this result. And the 31st of August of 2023, there was a formal notification that we had won. Now, the Constitutional Court that passed the referendum facilitated and permitted the convocation of the election was very clear. And we did a lot of the Constitutional Court, in case of saying yes, is going to be a progressive stop of all activities related to oil extraction within a year. Additionally, the state could not take any part or initiate any new relationships with oil companies. This is what in the same questionnaire, this was, of course, all reflected. So people knew what they were voting and they were asking the questions. Now, the progressive I'm sorry, wait a minute, she's going.
Deberá implicar también la reparación de la naturaleza, la protección del territorio de los pueblos indígenas en aislamiento voluntario, entre otras acciones, a través de los ministerios competentes. Esto pasó, esto fue notificado, como les decía, el 31 de agosto.
This was notified in the 31st of August of 2023. And of course, there's a discussion of how it was interpreted in any parts. We thought that at that date, and 2024, all these actions of receding of all of the oil companies should have been done. However, the state and the government decided to interpret this, that this was the moment of the close. Now, there are a lot of voices that had pointed out that this is crazy, that another consult should be done, and we are at war, that the country needs this. So the government would have liked to do another consult. At the end of this month, we're going to have a visit again. And this is a very important element that you should know. In the Ecuadorian law, and I think in the law of all countries, one cannot decide or accept the results of a consult. You cannot do a law, or you cannot send that to an assembly, because in the rights matter, things can be done and undone. So the only possibility was doing again another popular consultation, referendum. But you know that politics now is done with questionnaires. So the government saw that he was going to lose again in the matter of security and military intervention. We are going through a lot of processes, very, very hard processing in terms of security. So The survey is now has won. There's a lot of discussions on the inviability of this, but we have already won. The discussion is no longer if this part of the park should be closed or not, but how and when. What is the topic that we should speak here or talk about here in Ecuador? But we think that it also should be talked about in different scenarios. This is a great opportunity to reflect on close. To transition is not enough a moratory or a frontier, but to repair the damages that had already been done. We have to reflect upon the petroleum activity and all the negative impact that has in the people who lives there. How do we overcome this? Because there are lots of negotiations and a lot of blackmail, and there's a lot of terror in the communities about what's going to happen in the 31st of August of 2024 with all of the structures, social structures that depend on the oil companies or oil industry. The important thing is here that we should go beyond the vision and reposition the fact that what should happen is the reestablishment of nature. It's important for you to know that in Ecuador, nature is subject of rights. So it has been, we have been working in these 10 years. We're talking about 230 holes, 12 platforms, one platform of processing, and another net of products and nets. So now what should we discuss is how we're going to do to make of this reparation learning. This change does not mean no more petroleum, but also see beyond that and see, okay, how we're going to deal with the problems that the extractivism has led us to. In the case of Ecuador, this process of closure is taking its time, but it has to be done. This decision and has a sanction, a penalty. So we should be focused on what Ecuador is putting in the horizon and in this scenario. And we have recognized a plurinational country and respecting the rights of nature. For us, the closure process has to be synchronized with these concepts. And that's all what I'm going to say because I have taken enough time. Thank you very much, Esperanza. This is a process that we have already seen, that we have followed, and we have lived it with a lot of feelings and emotions. So we're going to keep talking about this. The series of different actors, political actors, movements, but also regional movements and regional actors, as to agree on the campaign. And these are all very, very interesting processes. All learning processes, and it has been happening for 10 years already. And so Ecuador has now gone a step beyond in this campaign that is a pedagogical process in the framework of apprenticeship. A fundamental role are played by different actors. in different spaces, not only in the national aspect, but also in the international. There's an initiative that we wanted to share with you. That's why we wanted to share this with you, because it's more efficient than that of Yasuni, but has been a strong fight in global terms to get to an agreement. Dialogues, agreements, and all these things should transform political realities that we have going through right now. So that's why Andres Gomez is here. At this moment, Andres Gomez is an environmentalist and ecological engineer from the National University of Colombia. He's in Ecuador right now as well, as Esperanza said. So he's going to talk about the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Thank you very much. Good night to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I have the privilege to just have arrived from the Yasuni Park. I am very near the enclosure, and I have been working with a lot of communities and Aborigines that are living in the Yasuni Park. And we are advancing in this proposal that is fundamental for the whole world. In this case, the Ecuadorian peoples have spoken and have joined the fight against the oil companies. Remember that the Yasuni Park has already been considered an oil field and not just a park. And it has this condition of having a lot of peoples living there that are living isolated from the rest of society. And this gives us a context that is very interesting, pretty much interested in this fight. I would like to talk about the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative, which fundamentally pretends to support and is focused on ending the expansion of coal, oil, and gas. And it's a way of tackling the climate crisis. And of course, we know that it hasn't been possible because of the intention of the petrol states and the capitalist system to point out exactly the fossil fuels as the cause of the climate crisis. So we would like to construct through this treaty an agreement, a treaty that goes beyond the Paris Agreement. So the Paris Agreement talks about possible fuels, but what we are trying to do with this treaty is to generate a strategy just and fair to manage the fossil fuels in a global level. So this initiative precisely is part of the civil society. There are more than 2,000 civil society organizations that have joined the global network, and many individuals, cities, subnational and national states. And it's very important to understand that this initiative is now supported by 12 states. Fundamentally Pacific nations that are now living the consequences of the climate crisis. There is the disapparition of their own lands, countries like Fiji, Sumea, Namibia that are suffering the consequences of the crisis. And this has been a long process that implicated a lot of incidents in social organizations in Colombia. And this has been done through the presence of these organizations that have been able to position it in the government programs. So they would like to advance in this sense to support the treaty in the COP28. And Colombia is the first continental country with more than a century of petroleum extraction. So this is a very important gamer or piece in the battle. So we'd like to expose, or we're trying to construct a tool that has a lot of treaties as well. It's based on other treaties that have talked about nuclear weapons, mines, gases, toxic gases, aborted in the Treaty of Montreal. So the fight against the oil can and does construct a different future. So the dynamic in which we are based on when we have more than 20 countries that support this initiative, we're going to negotiate in a collective form with different organizations and different groups and the academies and institutes. We make a collective construction that we think is going to be fundamental in this fight. And this addresses many topics and issues in which this tool would be really interesting and really important. So we're in this part of constructing the political support, many countries that could support this treaty as well. And we would like to keep following this line of action. We're making a lot of efforts to make this negotiation. This treaty such as to address solidarity issues as well. And we're going to talk about three pillars that are fundamental, the most important, that form the transition that is fair and just and stops the expansion of the petrol frontier. There are, of course, as we know as well, no needs of new projects in terms of oil extractivism. And we would like to also get out of the fossil fuel dependency, because we know there are lots of countries which has a lot of dependency on fossil fuels, but also have other countries which have not this same dependency, but also support this extractivism. So we would like to see these countries that are better economically can support these other countries to step away from the fossil fuel system. For example, when we see this field that has in decline, we can see it in the Yasuni Park, in the oil field that has been declining and has been impacted negatively in the Aborigine peoples living there. And of course, this impacts locally internationally and then globally. So we find countries like Ecuador and Colombia that has no historical recollection of all this situation, or at least they don't seem to have it, but they have a lot of dependency on fossil fuels. So in this way, we can address ecological, public, and societal issues. And this points at a way out of the fossil fuels, in which we have to imagine a different society, a better society. And today, being in the place where I am, in Ecuador, a few kilometers away from the national park, Yasuni, we understand that this is putting in the center of the conversation the life that is being threatened, the independence, and seeing that independence is the only way out of the fossil fuels. So we have to understand and to put to service all these territorial fights. The treaty should be a tool. So this should allow us to, in a global level, at the global level, to speed up these processes with all the arguments, with all the rational knowledge that we have to stop the dependency on fossil fuels, to step away from the crisis, to overcome it. So I would like other people to speak now. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andres, very much for connecting from that territory and at this moment.
Gracias. Sí. Ajá, dice que no. Pero bueno, voy aquí presentando mientras se activa la cámara y un poco conversando. Hay algunos aspectos que señalaba Andrés que son
There
fundamentales
are some
para
aspects that Andres was talking about that are fundamentals when speaking about this topic, and it has to do specifically with what can constitute or not a true fair transformation, and the possibility of leaving the fossil fuels underground against, of course, some proposals that are not efficient, at least politically, for the democratic process in the region. For example, making this progressively and all this slow, promoting the petrol companies. So this initiative somehow, some way, races in a more radical way to go to the structural problems and not postpone these actions that conduct, of course, to finally leaving the fossil fuels.
En Bakú, en Azerbaiyán, que es un país petrolero y donde principalmente el lobby petrolero va a tener el control sobre ese espacio. Pero luego de esa COP hay una COP también acá en Latinoamérica, habrá una COP en Brasil, sobre la que muchos movimientos también de la región tienen puestos, digamos, una ruta de acción y de trabajo para visibilizar especialmente las afectaciones y las
There are
iniciativas.
two COP meetings that we're going to be dealing. One of them is here. We have already talked about the Yasuni, but to bring another vision, there is, of course, a little bit more expanded in this sense, and the essential importance of this ecosystem that is alive, that is the Amazonia, in this polar crisis. We have already invited to Rafael Whitman. He is um, a research organizer. And before working at Amazon Watch, Rafa was a strategy advisor for the Americas at Amnesty International. He's a program coordinator. We're going to work with him and debate this perspective, how these are initiatives of transition being focused on leaving behind fossil fuels to impact positively in the Amazon. Thank you very much. Thank you. Can you all hear me? Yes. Yes, perfectly. Okay, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I am really glad to be here. Hello, Esperanza, Andres. It's a pleasure to be here. I should say that I have been working in the mining field, so I have to say thanks to my colleague today, but the idea is to bring another view, an Amazon view, in terms of petroleum, in terms of oil for transitions, because I have seen that there are a lot of people here speaking. I'm going to speak in Spanish, although the presentation was already in English. So I would like to say, first of all, a few years ago in Quito, I attended a workshop within petrocapitalism. Petrol exportation is basically I would like to start here because I'm going to end up talking about more pragmatic things, but I think the most important thing in this view, the most structural things, are these ones. So the Amazon is basically the source of collective life, but it's fundamental, of course. We know that it's the world's largest tropical rainforest. It houses up to 30% of the world's species. Is home to many indigenous peoples, more than 410. 82 of them are living in isolation by choice. And of course, helping in the global climate regulation. And of course, Esperanza knows this better than anyone. This is a space that is always disputed between a lot of actors, mining companies, oiling companies, conservationist organizations, but also organizations related to crime and international crime as well. So, of course, oil has a very important role in many forms of exploitation. So, any just transition requires ending oil, and not only oil, but also all the system that is behind it. So I think this is super important, a key point. But I also like to see how we articulate these strategies. How do we put them into practice? Somehow, a view like the Pacto Ecosocial del Sur is more integral in a way. There's a need to leave oil behind. And the debate right now is, of course, the tipping point, the critical point in which the Amazon is right now in. We, of course, know this is a rainforest. There is an ecosystem that is being put under a lot of pressure. And of course, putting it against any kind of pressure from oil companies is crazy. So, of course, putting more exploitation in this area is a big problem. For example, Yasuni is a non is an example um, very good example for this topic. Of course, Brazil, Lula has announced last year oil and gas expansions. Of course, these are all the plans from the oil companies, as you can see. We think that somehow the way in which petroleum can be expanded in the Amazonia reflects a racist imaginarium, and it paves the way for more violent ways to appropriate the Amazon. So these oil companies were thought as criminal organizations. As you can see here, there has been a lot of spills. For example, in the North Korean pipeline oil has made a lot of spills. So we know that any kind of expansion of petroleum is not about petroleum per se, but it's also an economy, a oil industry, but articulated to business in the agro area, minery, and criminal organizations that also articulated. So the impact is not about petroleum or oil. It's also in the dispute over the Amazon. Against it, what is it that we can do? Of course, we know an organization, and we do a lot of strategies. We have to do anything that we can do in different spaces. So I would like to see this. I'm going to end there. But in other ways, there are other kind of strategies. For example, finance dangerous for all companies, demands and consumers, political strategies, litigation, territorial. These new narratives by Acción Ecológica and the Yasuni experience are, of course, vital to this fight. What we are here can see that, of course, there are a lot of market and demand. We can also see here that the petroleum made in the Amazon is mostly produced in Ecuador and is also exported to the United States. And within the United States is going through a very particular state, which is California. Here you can say that most Amazon crude goes to the US. It's a 48.9% goes to California. This is, of course, is approximate. But this is very interesting because California is one of the states that, at least in discourse, is leading the transition view. So to do campaigns in California, as we are doing right now, is absolutely fundamental to treat and to try to step away from fossil fuels. This is one of the strategies that we are implementing right now. I think it is fundamental to talk also about who are the investors. And this is another strategy that is key in this sort of situations. For example, here in Petroperú, this has a lot of contradictions, internal contradictions. Of course, we have advanced a little bit that are quite important to stop financing part of the oil companies' activities. But of course, these are not the only strategies that we can implement, because this is talking a lot with the people that are sustaining this system. But of course, we think these strategies should be systemic and should attack in all fronts. The base of all of this is hope and, of course, doubts and challenges in these areas and the new conditions that are emerging, of course, collisions, sorry. And I would like to talk about the place where I live and how in the last year, these different groups has unified their fights to mediate and reparate decades and decades of exploitation. Peoples like Wampi and Shao. Okay, I'm sorry, I couldn't understand that. This is all part of a new comprehension that the industry threatens a lot of us. The adversary is the same. And this has to do with the images that you can see here. These are all the plants, the petrol plants, the oil extraction plants. This also requires that the peoples, that the territories also go against these oil companies. One of the processes that gives us more hope is this proposal to reconstruct the Amazon. It has been launched in 10 towns, with along with, of course, regional governments. And here, of course, even though the peoples knows that all this infrastructure is needed, of course, they are searching for other infrastructures. And this cannot wait, because the ways of living and consuming has to change. Of course, this is being impulsated in many parts of this alliance that historically has not had any kind of reparation. And in the last years, this alliance has also gone to fishers as well, fisher communities, but that also suffer because of oil spills. So one of the things that are more helpful for us is how all of these different fights are getting together, forming a net, intertwining to make autonomy and solutions possible for everyone. There's going to be a delegation in the United States, so we can talk about this topic. And now I'm going to finish, because Andres and Esperanza have been impeccable, sorry. Of course, there are things to celebrate. Of course, in a continental scenario like this, when, for example, there's a hopeful horizon we should go through. Of course, we're also conscious of the scenario on a global level. The alliance of the 7 nation alliances and the indigenous autonomies in Peru have been united, have been considering excluding the Amazon from the oil extractivism. As a movement, this is really important for us, because it gives us hope, of course. So oil, of course, all this topic has to do with disputes and territorial strategies. We should see how we can interrelate, for example, the expansion of Eres de Clima Transnacional, that are opening the territory for exportation. Of course, this is also what Esperanza already told us, so we hope that the Yasuni situation can go on. We are also seeing a lot of attacks against people who express themselves against all the oil extractivism at the companies. We know, but we also see the damage that have been happening throughout the years. So these fear tactics or strategies impulsed by the oil companies have been impacted negatively. We also have to see better economic alternatives because we see a lot of strategies and resistance, but also at these spaces that are disputed, that makes all the territory in danger. So this is a profound dispute where there is something to celebrate, where there are examples that we can share, and we have already shared in this meeting, and places in which we can think how to strengthen our fights. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening to me. Thank you, Rafa, for your presentation. This has made a lot of connections with what Esperanza said, and precisely to talk about these initiatives and keep making connections and forms and ways of embody and put some fire, some heart into this. One of the things that I would like to ask you is precisely, okay, this is happening, right? It has been happening for quite a long time now, but it's also happening in the Yasuni. And this hope that brings the Yasunization, the possibility of Yasunize other territories, to bring hope to other organizations and groups to help. No local process is vertical, 100%. So these experiences are being recorded, of course. But this can also help us in this, all these experiences can also help us in this meeting. I'm sorry, I cannot hear Liliana. No, we cannot hear you. Okay, Liliana has lost connection. I don't know what's... Oh, okay, there we go.
De alguna manera del mundo, ¿no? Contestando así una a una o las hago y de pronto.
Okay, Liliana has left the meeting. Hello, there you are again. Okay, hi. The internet connection is not that good. Esperanza, please tell us a bit more about this learning that you have been acknowledging. And of course, the things that you think are strategic to inspire people around the world and inspired by the Yasunization. And of course, through this pedagogical process, opens up more things that we're learning about. All right, that's great. Well, I think we have 15 minutes, right? Yeah, there are 30 minutes left. So yeah, 5 or 7 minutes, and then we are going to close the experiences.
Yo sigo, sí, sí, sí. 5 minutitos me tomo
Okay,
entonces.
so 5 minutes. Well, what I want to note that is all this fraud process, and we would like to not lose these Yasuni strategies. The strategy that we use is the Yasunization of territories. All this group that have been formed for the science collections and to make this park a utopia for the country, we localized them in different provinces in Ecuador. And we said, okay, in this province, we have our own Yasuni. It could be the Cordillera del Condo or Páramo of Sancocha or Ganates. This was a very nice work that was done with the groups that had already formed and wanted to mobilize to recognize that there is a sacred site in each of these territories. We could do two surveys. In Cuenca, we won a consult. The city has been declared free of minery. And in many other cities, we made a lot of other things. It was not concreted basically in extractivism or activities. I remember that one of the things that we worked on was abuses that were being made in a zoo. So the question is, how do we mobilize people? How do we maintain this spirit in the people? We have put our heart and our vision in the processes of mobilization of people. Of course, this is in situation of fraud is very difficult because you get to go to the legal part. And this was terrible for us because we had to do it. But we succeeded in some territories, and we did all these processes with clear causes. Now, in this thing of clear causes, there was a very important learning, and it has to do with the situation in Ecuador in the last years that has been that we have been working in the recognition of the nature as a subject of rights. So we want to focus on positivist views. We talk about paradise, the water that sings, that flows, people, places that are magical and mysterious, the beings, their habitat, the forest, and we had to conditionate this tale so that permits a horizon of hope and not something that is negative. We have been working on it, we have to work on it. And for example, in El Mirador del Cóndor, in which the pictures that you can share are real tragedies. What we have done in the Yasuni case, we had to focus on the things that we could lose, more on the tragedy than of the things that we have already lost. And in that way, we connected with a lot of areas that not necessarily had a strong opposition in the environmental topics. We thought that it was not only about convincing the already existing movements, but we also had to move the whole society. And for that, the messages were for those people, for those areas, instead of the critics of destructivism and denouncing violence, cancer cases, and oil spills. This was the strategy that we formed because we thought that we had to add voices of peoples of whom we had never spoken about. We had to convince people to sign in 30 seconds. In 30 seconds, we have to convince people to say, okay, yes, I'm putting my sign on this. I'm firming. And this is something that I think is very interesting to share. And I don't know if it's even more difficult today, because how do we say that it's all marvelous and wonderful because the oil industry is strong? So our campaign is towards how do you want the Yasuni to be once the oil company leaves, to again use this tale of clean rivers, wonderful places, and amazing animals to, of course, emancipate our country and emancipate nature as well from us. So strategically, I think it is very important to act with decentralized strategies. We have we have already worked on this several years, we do not have just one strategy. We have an improvisation of strategies, which means that we do anything that we can do and to not put a negative view on these processes. Acción Ecológica has worked uh, all life in this campaign of the Yasni, and we have tried to be in this situation that we're not going to speak with people, we're not going to be informed, we're not going to go to any kind of march or search. So yeah, there's this scenario of disinformation, de-information. So these strategies, these decentralized strategies are key in all the consult processes. And our questions has already been, okay, what do you want the Yasuni to be? But this campaign was not easy, of course, because our discourse historically and traditionally has always been no to minery, no to oil companies, and it's always have been a lot of no's. But we have tried with many groups of young people, women and children to say, okay, how do we get these people to participate and to say, okay, all right, I'm listening to you. And we could do this through strategies that um, put the focus on a possible change, that this is all possible, and there are many reasons to fight against the oil companies. And this is what we want to do. We want to reduce our nose to a very big yes to life that goes to the future. That is, this future is really possible. It really is. So we have tried to speak to all sectors, all areas and organizations, and incorporate strategies and messages of every single part of them, which can be really diverse. So this openness and decentralization and to open up to others, very beautiful things have come to happen. Yes to life. We have talked with feminists, with children, with workers, with people who sell ice creams as well. So we're always trying to see, okay, what is the method that moves them? And to try and find an agreement with all these sectors, with all these areas. It was beautiful, Esperanza. These all alternatives from the life perspective. So there are a lot of people who say, okay, living alternatives, who say, all right, let's not say no, let's say yes. And precisely talking about life and many of these territories and petrol and mining fields that we have already talked about, that threatens the life of in these spaces. It's always assumed that there are not communities, no these places are dead, inert, and of course they're easily exploitable. And places like the Amazon is just nature in the sense of the strict sense of the word. Like, it's just plants and trees. It's not something that belongs to me. So I would like to know, of course, this is a huge deal. This is, talking with regional and local governments, going against the already prefabricated structures and convince them from another perspective that focus on life. So the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, like Rafael had already talked about and addressed as well. So I would like you to tell us a bit more about those challenges that you are already facing and you face day by day. And I think this is an initiative that is has a perspective in the territory. Your presence in the Yasuni Park shows us this. Lily, of course, thank you, of course. Yeah, I'm going to talk about something that Esperanza said, the prevalence of life and alternatives to the nose. So this is another tool that we can give them, a global tool that we can use against failure of negotiations on climate change negotiations. And of course, we have to reivindicate social groups. And this treaty can, of course, affect directly the cause of the climate crisis and the political crisis as well. So I would like to talk about the alternatives, life alternatives. So talking about, for example, nation states that want to negotiate and the important capital of to carry this message. There are more than 2,000 organizations that support the treaty, that at this moment are just 12 states and nations. ASEMI, CAJASAEMI. There's a huge variety of organizations and strategies. RAF, Amazon Watch, Acción Ecológica, and so this is understanding the Amazon, as you were explaining, Lily, as a fundamental place to the deconstruction of extractivism. We could, of course, talk about an Amazon without fossils. Yes, these are the strong points of Ecuador, but of course, through the native nations, indigenous nations as well, and territorial organizations, of course, um, go beyond the nation states. So there are a lot of problems, challenges, but also we have a lot of possibilities that this intention of these states, for example, what means to the Pacific South, South Pacific. But yeah, the states are in an absolute crisis. They are, of course, very far away from us, but this is not a comparable situation, of course, because daily there is this symbolic power that materializes this climate change. These countries are, of course, have no interference around the extractivism, and of course, they are a basis, a moral basis. And how do we hope this attracts these other states, for example, as Colombia, and these specific conditions that I have already talked about, to propose this collective action that takes the idea, the fundamental idea of leaving the fossils underground, that of course, for example, precisely belong to the Yasuni Park. For example, when Derrida spoke about the blood of the earth in Africa as well, Colombia. And this is all examples of how we try to materialize these ideas. They should be a tool for all the collective fights and battles. So our presence is, of course, behind all these organizations, these territorial things, as a key point, as a tool. I insist in this part, is a path of construction that allows us to build a collective fight. And this has to be, of course, just, equitative, and should be adequate to our situations, of course, to everything that threatens the life. So I think, Lily, that's
No,
all I
perfecto,
have to
tal
say.
vez sí, justito.
No, that was perfect.
Quería
Thank you.
escuchar a Rafa que nos
We
estaba
also want
contando su
to um,
experiencia
hear
de
Rafa,
su
that is
país,
also
de sus
talking about the experiences
o gobiernos territoriales autónomos, pero un poco también en donde tú has
with
dejado
territorial
sentado tu
governments,
posición, ¿no? Porque allí se juegan además nuevas
because
valoraciones, o sea, valoraciones no nuevas. Digamos, ese es el problema de las alternativas que parecen nuevas,
this is
pero
the
en realidad
problem of
son
alternatives
valoraciones
that
ancestrales,
seem to be new, but they are kind of ancestral, really, really old,
deberíamos aprender más temas.
ancient.
Pero bueno,
And we should, of course, learn
regresando
about
al
this.
tema
But
de los territorios
precisely
autónomos amazónicos, ¿no?
in this
Y
part
hacer
of
esta
the
referencia hacia el
autonomous
futuro para
territorial
precisamente para que
places,
sean posibles
uh,
alternativas
I'd like you to talk about that,
radicales como estas, ¿no?
yeah,
Rafa,
to
un
talk
poco, pero
us
más
about
profundo. Y también sobre
more
los retos
about the importance, of course, the
del
challenges
saneamiento, que ya tú los tomabas
um,
y habías hablado de ellos, pero si quisieras como
that you already have in
en
in
términos de
this
desafíos, ¿cuáles
place.
son esos grandes
But in
desafíos
terms of challenges,
en
which are
impulsar
the challenges?
espacios que son más autónomos, ¿no?
Which are the big ones in these spaces? Okay, thank you very much, Andres and Esperanza, for all these ideas. Yeah, all of this surge, because the nature of fights has always been in these communities, native communities, of course, and we want to defragmentalize this the discourse against these places. And in the other side, answering to the state, we have been a lot of litigations. These litigations are maintained and has started a process of recuperation of these territories is a very complex process, contradictory, but it's possible because it has been maintained and there are notions of territory as a form of integral and relational thing. And there is, of course, in codependency with the rivers, the forest, and the peoples that live there. There's a lot of pressure, sorry, for against all fields. But I think the key point here is what's happening right now. There are very big spaces that have helped in this critical moment. So what I think that these people have to go through, it's a lot because they are going against the climate change and oil companies, and these are multi-billionaire companies. So I think the strategy of making alliances beyond their own limits, but also with the mobilized people, it's also part of the knowledge of all these people. So I think the more urgent things are the topic of the role of the states, the level of violence that they manage to impose different extractivism activities. It's a fundamental challenge, of course. And the second thing is that we're in a moment in which the economies are under lots of pressure. Of course, there are people who are more isolated and have a better economy, but other other places have not the same pollution capacities. So I think the third thing that I should mention is that even though we have advancements in a lot of places, all these processes and co-participation are non-existent in these countries. So I think those are the three main challenges that we should be talking about.
Gracias, Rafa. Sí,
Thank you very much,
una
Rafa.
cosa que se ha
these are more things that open up the debate, and of course, we should continue later. So, of course, we have to keep a focus on the Amazon and on these movements and this acceleration of the crisis, as we call it in this webinar, the race against the fossil fuels. And of course, they have the participants of this webinar have presented a lot of alternatives and perspectives, thoughts at a global level to get to an agreement to make more alive all the things that sustain life. And of course, the more important things that have to do with generating new narratives, put some hope around our discourses as well as activists, intellectuals, and fighters, and people who are, of course, against the development that, of course, go against everything that is good. Esperanza, I would like to close this meeting with a final reflection upon this thing. I would like to also thank all of you to be here, to IPS, Global Just Transition, Pacto Ecosocial Intercultural del Sur, and in which many of us are, of course, in. And of course, the invitation to follow each other in our channels and to know more about these initiatives and to see, okay, if we can join the fight, um, and to be part of these events and discussion places. Pacto Ecosocial is going to be in Peru, and of course, we will also read the publications, the posts that we always post on our page. Esperanza, if you can, please do a closure today to give us something to think about that is characteristic of you. Thank you very much for being here. Well, I was about to say thank you, but yeah, it is clear to me that this is a joint fight for all organizations around the world, and all people is present here. The young people, the whole Ecuador is present here. But just really, it has caught my attention that how this possibility of having these territories is from where we can think the transition and the construction of a possible future is possible. We also talked about the utopia, and this U of utopia is focused on, other possibilities. Yasuni has gained a space in the heart of many people, and this is a joint fight. I am in love with these meetings, and I love to know that Roberto and Andres are here. There has been a lot of studies on reparations and social studies, and of course Raphael as well. I think this fight, this battle, allows us to have a common consensus, and we are inspired and co-inspired. I cannot not say thank you, particularly to the organizers of the event. Thank you, Espe. Thank you, everyone, and the Institute for Policy Studies as well for giving us the space. And of course, a big wave to all of you. And we are all connected and co-inspired. Goodbye.